afternoon. Welcome to The Ambassador with me, Ambassador Susan Nganga. To our top story, tensions in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo continue to escalate as M23 rebels edge closer to the city of Goma, heightening fears for over 1 million residents. The ongoing violence has intensified a regional crisis, drawing urgent calls for intervention from international bodies, including the United Nations, and from East Africa Community leader, President William Ruto, who has called for immediate action to end the violence and bring peace to the region.
The conflict in the DRC's eastern provinces has been simmering for decades, with multiple armed groups, including the M23 rebels, vying for control of the region. The M23, primarily made of ethnic Tutsis, broke away from the Congolese army over a decade ago and has since been a key player in the region's instability. Recently, the rebel group has made significant advances, seizing multiple towns, including the strategic city of Sake. Goma, a regional hub of over 2 million people, is now under direct threat as M23 forces continue their march towards the city. In response to the growing violence, the United Nations held an emergency meeting to address the deteriorating situation. The UN has condemned the rebels group's actions, which have further jeopardized the safety of civilians and displaced hundreds of thousands.
The Secretary General calls on the M23 to immediately cease its offensive, withdraw from all occupied areas, and abide by the 31st of July 2024 ceasefire agreement. The Secretary General also said that he is deeply troubled by the most recent report of the group of experts concerning the presence of Rwandan troops on Congolese soil and continued support to the M23. He calls on all actors to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and to put an end to all forms of support to armed groups, whether Congolese or foreign.
Meanwhile, the government of the DRC has severed diplomatic ties with neighboring Rwanda, accusing the country of supporting the M23 rebels.
This Security Council must impose targeted sanctions, including asset freeze and travel ban, not only against identified members of the chain of command of the RDF, but also against the political decision-makers responsible for this aggression.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is going through one of its darkest periods in recent history, marked by a security crisis of alarming gravity in the eastern part of our country. The Congolese people will not cede to this injustice. We will continue to defend our rights, protect our territory, and demand respect and sovereignty.
Although Rwanda denies these allegations, it has acknowledged the presence of its troops in eastern DRC to safeguard its own security, citing rising tensions along the border.
The current crisis could have been averted had the DRC government demonstrated a genuine commitment to peace.
In Kenya, President William Ruto, who chairs the Eastern African Community, has called for immediate and unconditional cessation of hostilities in the DRC. He condemned the escalating insecurity and the humanitarian crisis that has been worsened by ongoing military actions.
The escalating conflict and deteriorating situation in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo are a grave concern to the people and governments of East Africa. Noting the worsening humanitarian crisis exacerbated by ongoing military actions, including the closure of airspace in Goma, I call for the immediate and unconditional cessation of hostilities.
In his statement, Ruto urged the governments of both Rwanda and the DRC to prioritize peace for the sake of the region's stability.
As the current chair of the East African Community, Kenya is aware of the region's critical responsibility in de-escalating violence and facilitating dialogue between the parties involved. We confirm and firmly believe that a sustainable solution can only be achieved through engagement, constructive dialogue, and a renewed commitment to peace. I call on the parties to the Luanda process on Eastern DRC and appeal specifically to my brothers, President Felix Tshisekedi and President Paul Kagame, both of whom I have had the occasion to speak to this evening to heed the call for peace from the people of our region and the international community.
Looking ahead, the situation in the DRC remains precarious with no immediate solution in sight. The UN and regional bodies are intensifying efforts to mediate with hopes of bringing an end to the violence. The humanitarian crisis is expected to worsen as thousands of civilians continue to flee the violence, putting further strain on the region. President Ruto's calls for peace and stability will be crucial as East African leaders continue to navigate this complex crisis. As tensions rise, the international community's response will be pivotal in shaping the future of the DRC and its neighbors. Irene Juguna, GBS News.
At least 20 Nigerian soldiers, including a commanding officers, were killed in a 3-hour attack by ISWAP fighters on an Abbey base in Borno State. The attackers, arriving on gun trucks, caught the troops by surprise, overwhelming them in the remote Malfatori town. The violence is part of a broader regional crisis, with armed groups forcing millions from their homes and spreading across neighboring Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. Periskigo with more.
The World Health Organization reported on Sunday that around 70 people were killed in an attack on a hospital in Sudan's city of El Fasher. The attack targeted the Saudi Teaching Maternal Hospital, which local officials blame on the rebel group, the Rapid Support Forces. These incidents come as the civil war in Sudan intensifies, with the Rapid Support Forces suffering apparent losses to Sudanese military forces. On Saturday, Army Chief General Abdel Fattah appeared near a burning oil refinery north of Khartoum, which his forces claim to have seized from the Rapid Support Forces. Meanwhile, neighboring South Sudan has suspended access to social media platforms for at least 30 days due to the circulation of videos showing alleged killings of South Sudan's nationals in Sudan. This decision aims to prevent further violence and unrest within South Sudan. Periskigo, GBS News.
Prosecutors have indicted impeached President Yoon Suk Yeol on charges of leading an insurrection. The unprecedented move comes after his decree to impose martial law last month, sparking political turmoil across the country. Meanwhile, investigators from the Jeju airplane clash have released a report indicating bird strike might have caused the deadly aeroplane crash, which killed 179 people last month. Here is more on the scene.
South Korea's prosecutors have formally charged Yoon Suk Yeol with insurrection after his decree that sought to ban political activity and control media outlets. This move triggered political chaos, leading to the impeachment of Yoon. If convicted, Yoon could face a lengthy prison sentence, as insurrection carries severe penalties in South Korea, including life imprisonment. This marks a historic moment in South Korean politics, with Yoon becoming the first sitting president to face such grave charges. Yoon's lawyers have strongly criticized the indictment, calling it a horrible decision made by the prosecution. Yoon remains in custody after a dramatic standoff with authorities on January 15th. His defense team argues he never intended to fully enforce martial law, claiming it was merely a political warning. South Korean authorities released a report on the Jeju airplane crash that killed 179 people. An investigation reveals that bird strikes may have contributed to the disaster. The investigators have identified the bird species as migratory duck species that migrates from Siberia to Korea in winter. The accident, which involved a crash landing and subsequent explosion, remains under investigation by both South Korean and U.S. officials. The indictment of a former president and the deadly air disaster both reflect a deeper issues of accountability, safety, and leadership. As the country struggles to navigate these difficult times, it raises a fundamental question: can democratic institutions withstand such challenges and emerge stronger, or will the fall of a president and the tragedy of a disaster erode public trust in the system. These moments test the very core of South Korean society. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
An investigation is ongoing after more than 100 dolphins were found on the coast of Somalia's semi-autonomous Puntland region, with officials yet to establish what caused their deaths. On January 19, 2025, at least 100 dolphins were found stranded along the Mario coastline near Bosaso. Tragically, local authorities have confirmed that 69 of these dolphins died while around 30 were successfully rescued and returning to the sea thanks to the efforts of community members. The region's fisheries minister, Abdi Rizak Abdullahi, commented that at least 110 dolphins had been counted near the port of Bosaso so far, and samples had been taken to establish what happened. Residents and soldiers gathered to look at the grim sight, holding their noses because of the smell of the carcasses. Potential factors being considered include environmental changes, illness, noise pollution from human activities, and illegal fishing practices. The Minister for Environment in Puntland emphasized that illegal fishing nets or water contamination could pose serious threats to marine life. Colombia has announced a pause on deportation flights for migrants after facing tariff threats from former U.S. President Donald Trump. The decision highlights the complex dynamics between the two nations as they navigate migration and trade issues.
In a significant shift, Colombia has decided to temporarily suspend deportation flights for migrants bound for the United States. The announcement comes in response to a warning from U.S. President Donald Trump, who threatened to impose tariffs if the flight continued. Colombia, a key trade partner of the United States, faced the possibility of economic repercussions through tariffs. The Trump administration linked the migration issue directly to economic cooperation, underscoring the leverage of trade in diplomatic negotiation. A Colombian official explained the decision, saying, "We are committed to working with the United States to address migration challenges while safeguarding our economic ties." The suspension is seen as an effort to maintain the critical trade partnership between the two nations, which support billions of dollars in annual commerce. Meanwhile, advocacy groups have called for a more compassionate approach to migration, arguing both nations to address root causes such as poverty and violence in the region. As Colombia halted deportation flights, this decision underscores the intricate balance between migration policies and international trade. Both countries now face the challenge of finding sustainable solutions while preserving their economic partnership. Jay Kuria, GBS News.
Yemen's Houthis rebels have released 153 war detainees, a move seen as a potential step towards restarting peace talks in the country's ongoing conflict. The International Committee of the Red Cross facilitated the release, ensuring the detainees were in contact with their families. However, the announcement comes just days after the Houthis detained 7 Yemeni UN workers, raising concerns about continued instability in the region.
Significant move towards potential peacekeeping, Yemen's Houthi rebels have released 153 war detainees, a development that could pave way for the renewed negotiations aimed at ending the country's decade-long conflict. The release, confirmed by the International Committee of Red Cross, marks a significant sign amidst the ongoing humanitarian crisis
that has already claimed over 150 lives. The release of the detainees was facilitated by the ICRC, which played a pivotal role in verifying the identities of those freed and ensuring they were in contact with their families. They also underwent medical checkups and received assistance before being sent home by land. This humanitarian gesture, although a positive sign, was overshadowed by the recent detention of 7 Yemeni workers employed by the United Nations, raising concerns over the persistent instability in the region. The conflict, which has plunged Yemen into one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, continues to cause immense suffering for civilians caught in the crossfire. While the release of detainees may provide a glimmer of hope, the ongoing volatility in Yemen serves as a reminder of how delicate the peace process is. The international community remains hopeful that further exchange will lead to meaningful dialogue, but without a sustained commitment to peace from all parties, the road to stability in Yemen remains uncertain. Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
Thank you for staying with us. We have covered some important stories today, but there is more to come. Stay tuned and we'll be right back with more updates.
Are you all happy to see me? Yes, I'm also very happy to see you. We're going to make, ta-da, a banana milk package. We're done with the banana milk package.
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back to the bulletin. Now, Israeli forces have killed 22 people in southern Lebanon on Sunday. This comes after a deadline for Israeli military withdrawal expired, with thousands of Lebanese citizens trying to return to their homes despite Israeli orders. The violence has raised further tensions in the region. Meanwhile, in Gaza, displaced citizens were blocked from returning home. In the north, due to Hamas fail to release one female hostage, Abdi Hamid Ali has more.
Lebanese authorities report that 22 people were killed and at least 124 others injured after the Israeli forces attacked civilians in southern Lebanon. These attacks occurred as thousands of Lebanese residents try to return to their homes, which remains under Israeli occupation. The Israeli military claims it fired warning shots after identifying potential threats near troop positions.
This day, tomorrow, 1 month, 1 year, every day we will stay here to enter our country.
This comes after Israel announced it will keep troops in the south beyond the deadline set in a US-brokered ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah. Israel claims its military objective in the south includes the dismantling of Hezbollah's military infrastructure and the removal of weapons. Meanwhile, in Gaza, a truce agreement has resulted in the exchange of hostages. But the failure to release a female Israeli civilian has led to a halt in the return of Gazans to their homes in the north, where much of the damage from the war is located.
Through a lot of suffering, when I came here, I thought the road would be open for us to go back home. But I came to find lots of people waiting. The checkpoint's still closed. Only God knows how much time it will take for the checkpoint to open.
Meanwhile, US President Trump's suggestion to relocate Palestinians from Gaza to Jordan and Egypt has been rejected by both countries, and Palestinians have called it a violation of their rights.
We say to Trump and the whole world, we will not leave Palestine or Gaza, no matter what happens. God willing, we will remain in Gaza. We will not leave Gaza or Palestine, no matter what Trump or the world says.
For years, Trump and Netanyahu have been dreaming of this deal, but it will never happen. Our people are steadfast.
The situation in both Lebanon and Gaza remains critical, with violence escalating and political solutions still out of reach. As the international community struggles to find a way to address the humanitarian crisis in both regions, the calls for peace and stability grow louder. However, the outlook for a sustainable resolution remains uncertain. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
At least 20 Nigerian soldiers, including a commanding officers, were killed in a 3-hour attack by ISWAP fighters on an army base in Borno State. The attackers, arriving on gun trucks, caught the troops by surprise, overwhelming them in the remote Malfatori town. The violence is part of a broader regional crisis, with armed groups forcing millions from their homes and spreading across the neighboring Niger, Chad, and Cameroon.
At least 20 Nigerian soldiers were killed in a suspected attack by ISWAP fighters on an army based in the northeastern Borno State, underscoring the growing security crisis in the Sahel. The attack, which targeted the Nigerian Army 149th Battalion in Malam Fatoli, lasted for over 3 hours, with a commanding officer among those killed.
We came to this location. We met a lot of resistance from the Lakurawas because this is one of their strongholds. And they usually come here in their 50s, 100s to carry out admin and go back to the bush.
This violent incident highlights the escalating threat posed by armed groups in the region, including ISWAP and the challenges facing the Nigerian army. The situation in the Sahel is further complicated by the recent disengagement of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso from the Economic Community of the West Africa states. This withdrawal has weakened regional cooperation in combating extremist violence and instability. The lack of coordination between these countries and the broader ECOWAS force has led to security vacuum, allowing armed groups to intensify their attacks. The violence, which has already displaced millions in the northeast of Nigeria, has spilled over into neighboring Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis and further complicating efforts to establish peace and security in the region. The creation of a regional force to tackle the armed groups is now more critical than ever, but the recent political shifts may hinder its effectiveness. Perez Kigo, GBS News.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has arrived in Kabul for high-level talks with Taliban officials. This marks the first such meeting since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan in 2021. During the visit, discussion focused on security along the shared border and strengthening economic ties between the two countries. This comes just days after the Taliban rejected an ICC request to arrest 2 senior officials accused of persecuting women.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in Kabul for talks with the Taliban officials, marking the highest-level meeting between Iran and Afghanistan since the Taliban took control in August 2021. The discussion focused on border security and economic cooperation, raising important questions about the future of relations between the two nations. The two leaders discussed the security situation along their shared 900-kilometer border and explored opportunities for enhancing economic ties between Iran and Afghanistan. This visit comes just days after the Taliban rejected a court move to arrest two of their senior officials. The International Criminal Court had issued arrest warrants for these officials, accusing them of persecuting women. The Taliban has faced growing international pressure over its policies, particularly the barring of women from work, public places and education beyond the 6th grade since they regained control of the country. Despite the ongoing controversy, the diplomatic exchange highlights the complexity of Afghanistan's relation with neighboring countries, especially Iran, as they navigate both security and humanitarian concerns. While Iran's engagement with the Taliban could offer opportunities for regional cooperation, it also brings to the forefront the international community's continued concerns over the Taliban's treatment of women. The world will be watching closely to see if this diplomatic dialogue leads to any changes in the region's tense dynamics. Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
Haiti's president of the Transitional Presidential Council, Leslie Voltaire, has issued a stark warning about the potential consequences of the recent U.S. policies under the Trump administration. In recent statements, Voltaire expressed grave concerns that freezing U.S. aid programs, deporting migrants, and blocking refugees will plunge Haiti into an even deeper crisis as the nation grapples with gang violence and the displacement of more than 1 million people. Voltaire believes these actions will lead to catastrophic outcomes.
Haiti has long struggled with political instability and poverty, compounded by natural disasters and violence. In recent years, the situation has worsened significantly due to relentless gang activity in the capital Port-au-Prince and surrounding areas. Voltaire's government has been tasked with guiding the country towards election, but the path to stability remains elusive. The Trump administration policies have compounded Haiti's suffering. Voltaire criticized the decision to freeze United States humanitarian aid and the mass deportation of Haitians, many of whom have lived in the United States for years under the temporary protection system.
Trump said that Haiti is a shithole, so I don't think he will care about Haiti. The Dominican Republic, President Abinader is also displacing people. He's exporting repatriation of 10,000 Haitians a week. And also with the gang situation, we have a lot of IDP, internal displaced person, that amount like 700,000 people. The World Food Program is helping, the International Migration Organization is helping, but it's not enough. The situation will be catastrophic.
With Haiti already dealing with hunger, violence, and internal displacement, Voltaire warned that the potential return of hundreds of thousands of deported Haitians will stretch the country's resources to breaking point. Despite these challenges, Voltaire remains hopeful that Haiti can hold elections by next November. As Haiti continues its struggle against violent gangs and political instability, the international community's response in the coming months will be pivotal. With elections on the horizon, the question remains, can Haiti overcome this crisis and restore hope for its people, or will the situation continue to spiral out of control? Irene Juguna, GBS News.
In a move aimed at enhancing disaster preparedness and response, President Donald Trump issued an executive order establishing a council to review the operations and effectiveness of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. The Council is tasked with ensuring FEMA remains agile, effective, and capable of meeting the growing challenges posed by natural disasters.
Donald Trump took a decisive step to strengthen Federal Emergency Management Agency by signing an executive order that establishes a new oversight council. The council will conduct a comprehensive review of the agency's operation and recommend improvement to bolster disaster preparedness and response across the country. The council will focus on evaluating FEMA's performance in recent disasters, identifying gaps in preparedness, and proposing innovative strategies to address emerging threats such as climate change and cyber attacks. The initiative comes at a time when natural disasters are increasing frequency and intensity, placing additional demands on FEMA. The Council aims to ensure resources are used effectively and the agency is prepared for the challenges ahead. The review will include input from various stakeholders, including emergency response team, state officials, and community organizations. The Council is expected to deliver its initial findings within 6 months. Joy Kuria, GBS News.
And that international news marks the end of our bulletin today. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, same place, same time at 1 p.m. I have been your Ambassador Susan Nganga. Good afternoon.